All right, continuing on with this, the skin, there's cells that are found in there, and we have different types of cells. And so when we look at these, in the bottom around the stratum basale, you do have stem cells, undifferentiated, so they can become anything. You can make them into anything, and the modern biology has done a lot with that. So it's pretty amazing. You do have most of the cells are referred to, as I told you earlier, keratinocytes. These are the ones that actually produce keratin. Keratin is that waxy protein. You have in that basal and in that spinosum, you have these melanocytes. These are the ones that actually produce the pigment melanin. It is a protection. It goes and it wraps around the cells and it protects them from UV. And with UV exposure, these cells become more active and then they become less active. You do have in this epidermis those Meissner's corpuscles that I told you about. These are the ones where you can use discriminating touch. Put a blindfold on, put your hand in a bag, you can tell me what you're touching. So you do have part of your immune system cells in there, these Langerhans cells, these dendritic cells. These are white blood cells or macrophages and such. And they are running through that epidermis in that spinosum area and such, going after and attacking bacteria and viruses and other things that might trying to get into your skin. So there, your skin, healthy skin, very important. You get below the epidermis and now you're into your hide, your dermis. Anytime you see tanned leather, it's the dermis because the epidermis is rubbed off. So, and then you get rid of all of the fat and the muscles and everything. What's left is the dermis. The dermis is 2 layers and all, but it is very, very strong. Your dermis is. It is connective tissue, so it has this gel-like matrix and all. It contains the 3 types of fibers, the collagen, the elastic, and the reticular fibers. Very vascular, rich in nerves. Your lymph is right there because if anything gets through that basement membrane, it'll get picked up either in the bloodstream through the capillaries or it goes into the lymph. And then in your lymph along the way, you have lymph nodes with white blood cells waiting and looking for invaders. Your hair follicles, your sweat glands are epidermal, but they extend down into the dermis. So when you look at them on the slide, you can see the epidermis go down into it. And you have to know that all kinds of glands that are in the skin are epidermal in origin. So when we look at the dermis, there are 2 main layers. There's a papillary layer. This is mostly loose connective tissue, very vascular. It has these, a papilla is a bump. A pimple is a papillae. It's a bump. Within there, you have these capillary loops, which is where the oxygen, the nutrients, and all of that. And then you also have your sensory cells. Part of that Meissner cell is found in there. It's this layer, that produces these undulating folds of skin, produces your fingerprints, your friction ridges, and all. Then beneath that, you have this dense, irregular connective tissue. This is the reticular layer. And this is the thickest part of it right here. Very strong. Lots of fibers in this. These fibers line up in certain directions. They bundle up and line up in certain directions. And those are known as your tension lines. And you would want to know the direction of these fibers, these lines of cleavage, if you were going to be doing any kind of surgical procedure cutting into or underneath the skin. Because it's best to cut with the fibers and not against the fibers. It aids in the healing. And so in your appendages, in your arms and legs, they're running parallel. In your torso, it's kind of like a bullseye, an oval bullseye, but that's the direction that they run. So they're longitudinal in the limbs, circular in the trunk. So you want to make parallel incisions with these lines, and the skin heals better, less scarring, if you will. So you can tear these collagen fibers and such, and that leads to your stretch marks or your silvery skin. Weightlifters, young kids, if they grow too fast, sometimes pregnancy can leave these marks on the skin. Being very large and then being shrinking, you can see them. Underneath the dermis is the fat, the hypodermis and such. It's mostly or mainly adipose tissue, subcutaneous fat. But it is important, very important to have this because fat serves a purpose. So it's, protection, abrasion, heat loss, cool. It protects. So, and it is a energy storage. So, young and old don't have as much subcutaneous fat, and so young and old are more sensitive to heat and cold. So you have to watch taking very young children out in the heat or out in the cold, and the elderly, you need to be sensitive to them being exposed to too much heat or too cold of a environment. Coloration is due to pigments from the melanocytes, and the main pigment is melanin. And melanin comes in different flavors, and it comes in different amounts. And so when we look at people around the globe, you're looking at where their ancestors evolved, where they became successful at different areas, and you're seeing the evolution of the amount of melanin. The vast majority of all humans are an equatorial evolution, and really all humans migrated out from the equatorial regions, really Africa, and as they moved out, it's a difference because it's not everybody's the same. You have this bell curve of color, and as you move into different areas, different climates, you have to change your garments, which affects the amount of skin that's exposed. And so to be successful in a equatorial region, you really get too much sun and you're not wearing that many clothes. So you need more melanin. As you move into northern climates, then it's a cooler climate. So you put on more coverings, less skin exposed, and you need less melanin. So you get more vitamin D production. So it's a way of looking at it. But we all have the same number of melanocytes. We just have, through our evolution that was determined thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago, as to what color gets seen or shows. So, but this melanin is in that, it's surrounding these cells that are undergoing mitosis so that they are not damaged by UV radiation. You can affect it by the amount of sun exposure. Get lighter, get darker, and such. Keratin is another one. Keratin, like carrots, is orange. So, and you find that in your stratum corneum. If you look at your calluses and such, they kind of have an orange hue to them. You'll also see it deeper in the subcutaneous layers. And then when blood's flowing through your skin, it gives it color. So the hemoglobin that flows through, so blood supply gives skin color. Looking at skin color is a way of giving you a hint, what might be happening. So if a person appears bluish, they don't have enough oxygen. So you call that cyanosis. If they really had a red face, that could be due to hypertension, high blood pressure. It could be due to an inflammation. They're having a reaction to something. It could be emotional. A pallor is a paleness. So that could be due to low blood pressure or to anemia. Also could be due, emotional. You can scare someone white, you could say there. Jaundicing is a yellowing, and that's usually due to a liver problem. And so you have this bilirubin, this bile pigments that start building up in the blood, and you start seeing it not just in the skin, you'll see it in the sclera of the eye, in the nails and such too. a bronzing, which is you get a different coloration of the skin, and that's due to a adrenal disorder, Addison's disease. That's your adrenal glands are right above your kidneys and such. Of course, you know what a bruise looks like. That's right. And you can be easily bruising due to a lack of vitamin C. One condition is what, scurvy. You could have this bruising due to a genetic disorder where you don't have the clotting factors, and that would be the hemophilia. Overexposure, too much sun, not good. You need some sun, don't get me wrong. Too much of anything. Too much mayonnaise is bad, but too much be an overexposure and give you leathery skin. It messes with the elastin fibers and the collagen fibers, and it causes this clumping of the skin, causes this leathery skin and such. Too much sun, not enough sun can actually affect your immune system. There's a happy medium in there. So too much can alter the DNA. The DNA in that stratum basale and that stratum spinosum, which can then lead to skin cancers. Early on, if detected early on, very, very treatable. If left and ignored, if they break through the bottom, if they grow down through that basement membrane, then they get into the dermis, to the blood, to the lymph, and then these cancerous cells spread. And then it becomes a much, much harder fight. So early detection is key to any kind of cancer, but skin cancer especially. So, and then some antibiotics that a person might take, tetracycline comes to mind. Some antihistamines, they can actually cause you to be more sensitive. So I'm always good, I can take the sunlight, and you take these antibiotics, and you can actually then get a sunburn, which could then lead to DNA. It could cause bad things. So be aware of that when you read the packaging and it says avoid, sun exposure. Follow the rules there. So, all right. Markings are like your fingerprints, your binding lines and such, flexion lines. Those are your markings and all. The fingerprint, you would call them fingerprints, but they're known as friction ridges. They allow us and other primates to manipulate things with our fingers. I don't know if you've ever touched something hot and burned your fingers and you lose your fingerprints. It's hard to flip through papers or do other things. Flexion lines, that's when you look at your palm, you see the lines in there where your fingers bend or where your wrist bends, where your elbow bends. That dermis is held more tightly, bound down deep, closer to the bone to allow for that flexing of that joint. So you have those. Freckles, it's just melanized patches and such, and they're usually flat. It occurs in everybody on the planet, and also you see it more in some individuals than others, but it's just nothing to worry about. It's too much sun, your genetics, that's your freckles. So moles, that's something else you got to watch. It's melanized skin. They elevate, so they've grown up a little bit. Usually, not always, but usually a hair in there. Mostly harmless, but you watch them and such. On things like this, you do your ABCDs: asymmetry, the border, the color, the diameter. You keep an eye on it. And you ask your doctor to keep an eye on it. So, all right, we'll stop it right there.